Hey, did you know that Gary Vee is into video games? He specifically has VaynerSports, which is a sports management company who has a gaming and esports division run by Darren. Darren and I talked before. We did like a test audio space off the fly where we finally got to chat, and I met him briefly in San Diego, but never really had like the good and proper opportunity to really connect with him and talk about things. He's got a different view with gaming and esports and specifically talent management compared to others. His talent management pool that he manages at VaynerSports is really small. It's only 3 creators, and one of them as well is very significant in Web3 and NFTs. So we talk about the way he does business and why, and we talk about how he thinks things could be performing better for other managers as well as for esports. Hopefully you enjoy it.
I've been good, man. I just got back from Los Angeles, and then it was cold. I mean, it's chilly in Los Angeles. I'll take it, mid-50s. Now it's snowing in Minneapolis, but Damn. I've been traveling a lot, man. We've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, good. That's good, man. I tell you what, there's some conspiracy. I've been to LA 3 times now, and I've been to California as a whole 5 times. Never have I been to Fremont, San Francisco, or LA, and it has been warm. Never. And I've been when it should have been warm. It's not like I've been in winter every year. I don't get it.
Yeah. Sounds like I don't know. I guess you bring something else in your luggage when you travel.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, well, except for that time they forgot my luggage, but that's another story. Hey, did you know who I fly with? I think it was American Airlines. They delivered.
Well, there's your problem. You got to fly with Delta.
Really?
Yeah.
They delivered my luggage at like 11:45 p.m. one night to me. I was like, what the hell?
I mean, honestly, there you go. Just change over to Delta. Come on to the good side.
Oh man, but
free Wi-Fi, free entertainment, free drinks. Get your Delta Comfort ticket. Get a glass of wine.
Damn, my miles though, man. I can't give that up. I'm with One World, so it's like either Alaska or American.
I got you. So you've put your time into it. I get it.
Which is funny because it's the opposite here in Australia. Like the Australian equivalent of that is Qantas, and that's our best by far. That's like the premium service. It's pretty funny hearing that it's like the opposite in the US. I wonder why they'd partner with the opposite.
Yeah, Delta's. I'm a strong ambassador and advocate for Delta. That's for sure. They've treated me well.
You're gonna have to drop your sign up code, drop your link.
I swear, yeah.
Like, comment, subscribe, man. We'll go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. So what have you been working on recently?
Man, I mean, the BIGR signing to Dignitas, I think, was exciting at face value and at the surface level.
Yeah.
However, I also think in the esports industry, there's like a deeper announcement with that announcement. I think there's this world of like in esports, as we all know, everyone's getting fired and teams are getting kicked off and a lot of people are stepping away from Fortnite. And meanwhile, a massive name like BIGR is re-signing to an org who is obviously making a massive investment into the game and title of Fortnite. So I was very excited to be a part of that and get to know the team at Dignitas really well through this whole process. And like that's super fun. And then my other client, Bryson, we're signing an org announcement here in the next couple of weeks, which will be the first Web3 gaming creator to sign to an org, which is super fun. Like a lot of different tentacles with that. And then we got some fun announcements coming next week, expanding the roster. So yeah, it's a lot of momentum, man.
And man, when I briefly saw you and Bryson in person, I realized I forgot to tell him that he looks like Amir from Brockhampton. I don't know if you know who that is.
I know Brockhampton. I don't know what they look like. What's his name?
I'd look it up. Amir. Yeah, AMIR. Yeah, he had some non-favorable news come out, so I wouldn't conflate that with him, but I conflate his looks with Amir. He looks like Amir.
I'm about to look it up.
He was my favorite. He was my favorite in Brockhampton too, but yeah. Not a very fun character behind the scenes, apparently, some of the news that came out, but he looks like him.
Oh, he does a little bit, especially when he has the mustache.
Yes. Yeah, it's the mustache that really did it for me, dude.
Yeah, that's super funny.
Yeah, got a really cool voice in here as well, yeah. But
that's hilarious.
Yeah, the Dignitas thing's interesting, man, because BIGR's only been with one org ever, right? With Sentinels?
Sentinels, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think people forget, and I forget too, Dignitas was, from what I understand, and I can be corrected, they were the first ever esports team to be invested in / acquired by a sports team back in 2016 with the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, that whole Harrison Blitzer, that investment group. I mean, again, like Dignitas is like they've been around for like 20 years, like whatever it is. Like they're this like OG esports org that I feel like sometimes gets looked over a lot when people bring up teams, because they've always just, I feel like they've just kind of floated under the radar and they've never had like that massive cross-cultural moment. I almost feel like, but they've just been like building, and they've just like been doing things like it just feels like the right way. And then to your point, they've got this, I mean, extremely strong muscle of an investment group in the traditional sports space. Like they've got everything that the popular teams have, if not even more. It just for some reason, it just almost feels like they've been crouching in the grass waiting for their time to like really pounce. And I feel like that moment is kind of like now. Like I think now's the moment that they can separate themselves due to the muddiness of where the industry is, right? Here's where great companies separate themselves from the pack, is when times are tough, not when times are easy.
Yeah, there's something about like UK esports orgs. And I've asked this question, like when I first started doing my podcast, I had a few people on, and I still haven't gotten a proper answer. Like, why is the UK just so behind in esports and even gaming content creators? Like, I've tried to do things for clients before, and besides like the Sidemen, like who else is big from the UK, like in content? And besides like Dignitas, who's been around, I was just looking up when you were talking, they were founded in 2003 as a merger between two Battlefield 1942 clans. Like that's insane. It's a long. So BF2 was my first. It was my first competitive game, which is 2 titles after that. Like I remember being a child watching my dad play 1942 on his PC. So that's crazy. But I mean, it's kind of 2 parts in one. But it's always been really interesting to me. Like all the money pumped into public company Gfinity, Guild, and all their stuff that they're doing. I've just, Insomnia Land's pretty good, but still doesn't quite hold a flame to DreamHack really on a global scale, especially. But I just don't know. Like, why is the UK just so far behind in esports as a whole? Because they shouldn't be.
Yeah, that is definitely not a market that I know much about from like the fundamentals of what the hell is going on over there. So anything that I would be able to say was just pure speculation.
One guest for me from ages ago, right? I asked a friend. I've been lucky enough to make a couple of friends who were people that I looked up to when I was a kid, like in CS 1.6, like Khan, who played for Fnatic and still there, Patrick, and DSN, who played for Fnatic as well. They were like the dream team in CS 1.6 for a while with them and Forrest and Get Right. They won everything for like a year or 2 years. And part of what I asked them is like, why is Finland and Sweden so advanced in esports, and especially in Counter-Strike? And they think it's because terrible weather plus fast internet early means that people want to stay inside, and everybody had more ready access to internet. And I think in the opposite way with the UK, I think it's game choices, because they chose to become really good at what became the biggest esport in the world for quite some time, like Counter-Strike 1.6, and still one of the biggest in Counter-Strike in general, where like in the UK, they picked Call of Duty on PC, and they picked Battlefield, and they picked Counter-Strike Source, all of which were just non-successful esports at all. There was a bit of a flash of the pan with Championship Gaming Series in 2008, which Odie was part of, and that did well, but that shut down because they overspent something insane. I did a podcast about that, but I think that's part of the same with Australia too. Like we focused on the same kind of games. Like COD on PC wasn't a global esport. Counter-Strike Source wasn't. Everybody skipped it basically for CS:GO. Like it was all CS 1.6 into Extreme Masters World Cyber Games and et cetera, all the big comps. There were some for Source, but not many. And we had a very strong, Battlefields where I grew up, but I left after Battlefield 2 because it's just simply too many. You can't have 16v16 esports. That's just ridiculous. There's just too many people. So maybe that's part of it. They just didn't have the right start, and they're just 10 years behind because they picked the wrong games.
Yeah, I mean, picking the right games, man. I mean, and it's like, even if you feel like you picked the right game that's popular for players to play, there's still this void of whether or not people care about watching other people play competitively. I don't know. Again, like we go all the way back to like the issues of today's environment of esports. Just because a lot of people play the game doesn't mean that there's a business that can be built from a media and entertainment side, which like there are a lot of games that people play that have zero media entertainment value, that you can't sponsor the entertainment around it because there's just no viewership. It's more of an in-person play, or it's just an in-game component. People don't care about watching other people play it. They just like to play it themselves. Like that's a completely different behavior of gamers, which I think is fascinating, where it's like so many people have invested in these esports and whatever. It's just like, well, I don't know. Yeah. Again, I'm just like, we're going back to that same old conversation I know we always go back and forth on social media about, which I just think is fascinating. It's just like, esports is not dictated on how popular the game is in and of itself. It's its own business that has to be run as its own product. The product of esports has to be separated from the product that the game is. You have to run it that way. You don't necessarily get the trickle down effect, or you can't scale the trickle down as games get more popular. So does the media and entertainment from a property side around it. That's just not true. And I think we're starting to see that today.
That's what I always wondered about. I mean, Fortnite, right? Like 2019 World Cup time, which Booger won, who you manage. You know, there was apparently FaZe Clan was announcing like 10 players at a time to their roster, and that's not just them. They're just the obvious example. Everyone was doing that. You know, 100 Thieves and et cetera, et cetera. Go down the list. You know, everyone was announcing 6 to 10. But to me, it became clear during that tournament, and that was around the time too, we had we tried to make like a FaZe Clan House of Australia. So we had like a beautiful house on the waterfront and, you know, had creators in it and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, playing in those weekly cash cups and stuff, it became clear to me that Fortnite doesn't give a shit about the esports orgs at all. They were like, we just want to promote the players in the same way that, or a very similar way that the UFC does. You know, the UFC is there to promote the UFC, and the fighters are part of that, but they're promoting they're promoting their own product. And the fighters even have gyms, which they sort of represent, but not really. You know, and it seems to be the same way as Fortnite is about pushing Fortnite. Maybe another way to say it too is like I went Overwatch back in like 2016 or something like that, did this World Cup. And I went to the one in Sydney. It was like Team Australia, Team Finland, and someone else was there. And it was like sold out, 2,500-3,000 seat stadium at the Star Casino in Sydney. Was there with a couple of influencers that we sponsored at the time when I was at Corsair. And the crowd was sold out. They were going absolutely nuts. The merch booth was sold out before it opened, as in the line was so long that if you got near the end of the line, all the merch was already sold by the time you got there. But when the Team Australia players, they just won an amazing series on stage against one of the teams. They were just walking through the lobby, the same players wearing the same jerseys, and not a single person was stopping them to talk to them. They were just wandering through the lobby. And that really said to me that people just only care about the game of Overwatch. They don't care about the teams or the players anywhere near as much, unless you're like an XQC or something like that, unless you have a crazy extra personality.
Yeah, and I'd blame esports orgs for that as well. I mean, they are a massive problem with that. They don't do a good job investing into the growth of players either. Like that's the NBA 2K League's problem, right? Like you've got great players in the NBA 2K League that literally have under 1,000 followers on Instagram or on a Twitter. Like that can't happen in a league. That cannot happen in any form of media and entertainment. Like that should be number one, which then you think of the value in esports or can provide to players is giving them that platform, which was, you know, that used to be FaZe's big thing. You know, that's why everyone wanted to join FaZe, because it was almost like a magic pill of influence where like the more that they got vanillaed out, like now I feel like FaZe has lost a little bit of that, but like other orgs also, like what do you do for players and how can you help some of those players build their individual brands so that when you do an like that's where I feel like a lot of these orgs aren't connecting the siloed teams inside of the esports org. Like the more that we can build up the relevancy of our players, the more impactful our in-person events are going to be, which then helps our sales team out to sell larger scale sponsorships because they can showcase the level of traffic and influence our players and teams have. Like, so, but I to your exact point, like, I don't think that's a that's a player problem. I think that's an esports org problem, because they don't necessarily see it as a revenue generating service for players, but it trickles down to be, because to your exact point, how can I create revenue or develop a watch party opportunity in a city or a region or anywhere in the world if no one gives a shit about meeting our players? Meet and greets is what those in-person events are all about, is to see somebody that you watch on a screen every day of the week, to meet them in person, take a picture, sign an autograph, say that one thing that they never answered to you in chat before, whatever that moment is. But if I don't care about you as a player because you don't stream, you have no content, there's no way for me to get to know the person behind the mouse and keyboard or the controller, how do you grow revenue? Then your revenue is just spots and dots inventory of media. And that's the issue that we're dealing with today. So yeah, I think it's a lot of the esports org's problem. Like, they're not doing a good job building influence, building relevancy. To me, it's also very sad. It's almost like an ego check, right? When you like feel like you're a big deal or you're a successful individual in esports, and then all of a sudden, like, you'll go to an event and people don't recognize you. Like, I feel like that's very morally dissatisfying when you like, damn, like, I'm not that big of a deal. I feel like that's also some of the negative, that people might not want to show up to events because they don't actually want to get the realism of not being as potentially influential as you maybe thought you were. I don't know.
You know, that happened during the Intel Extreme Masters in Sydney. We've had 2 or 3 here. I can't remember. But in one of them, the Misfits, not the esports org, but like the Australian Content Creator Group, which doesn't exist anymore, they were there. I think they got paid to be there. I don't know. But there's like this viral video of them. The crowd, it was like the semi-finals or something like that, and quite a crucial match, and it was down to the wire, and then the crowd saw the Misfits sitting up in one of the booths and were yelling at the Misfits to go to like a certain door, and they had an impromptu meet and greet where they pulled like 700 people out of the audience during a semi-final to go see the Misfits, which I think says pretty much backs up everything that you were just talking about there. It's like, what are those people really there for? Are they there for MIBR and Cloud9 and Team Liquid and Renegades and whoever was playing? Or are they there because they just enjoy drinking beers with their mates, having fun and watching Counter-Strike? And they'd rather see the Misfits, who are like real like Aussie larrikins of content creator. You know, they do a lot of cringe stuff and, you know, a lot of non-PC stuff, etc. And that's why people love them.
It's the balance of both. I mean, I could talk out of both sides of my mouth. I think that's like where it's like trying to find the right perfect partnership, you know, because then at the same time you'd be like, well, I don't want to grow their brands too much, because then we become more irrelevant. Like, we want to be bigger than our players themselves, because that helps our business and brand moving forwards. But not understanding that part of building the relevancy of your players means that you then increase the relevancy of your brand, because more people are in your ecosystem. But what's the balance? And there isn't a right answer. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's just, that's, I feel like, what the day age old question is, of like, how do you balance both out? How much do you do to prop your talent up to build them individually, versus how much do you build your own corporate brand and community up, so that when those players do leave, you don't lose their entire fan base, which I think is very relevant right now. You know, people are more fans of individuals than they are teams and orgs, and that's not in the favor of teams and orgs. As I've mentioned a couple of times in some posts on the internet, like, it's rented audience. All orgs do is rent the audience from the creators, and that's just not a sustainable business model.
Yeah, I see that argument. Excuse me. I see that argument a lot with the UFC as well. Is they say, you know, if the UFC spends a lot of time and money and resources to build a star, a la Conor McGregor or something like that, then that star can use that star power that the UFC has given to them against them by demanding more money and more support, and maybe going to another organization to go fight for them instead of the UFC, you know? I mean, it's kind of happening with Francis Ngannou and stuff at the moment with them. So
yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, and this goes to a whole nother like interesting conversation to be had in this entire industry, which is a players association. That, like, whether it's per esport, per game, whether that's with the publisher, with the developers, with the orgs themselves, with a third party, private entity, whatever that might be, but a true players association, that if you want to compete competitively and earn money above a certain age, like you have to be a part of this association. And that contracts for orgs will become standardized, that there'll be there will be negotiation, but these contracts have been agreed upon, that there's no taking advantage of people. You can't just restructure a contract. It's how much money do you want? And you've got a potential cap if it's a specific league or players and a roster base or like whatever. There just has to be more standardization, so that negotiation that happens with those UFC fighters, like it's somewhat standardized. They want more money and more cuts from merch and media and pay-per-view and all of that, but all that is standardized. They've got their exact buckets of what they're negotiating. And I think that helps both parties in the process, is you've at least got an understanding of what the hell you're even negotiating for. Where in gaming and esports, every contract with every single org is its own contract. There's no standardization, which I think has this level of behind cloak and dagger. There's no transparency to what contracts look like across the board. Boga's contract is different than that contract, is different than that. Every contract is different. So who knows what people are getting and why they're getting it, which then it's difficult to scale an entire industry when our contract with the Sentinels was different than our contract with Dignitas. And then someone else was with FaZe and they want to go to TSM. Like, they don't know if they're even getting a good deal or a bad deal, because there's just a lack of transparency from a legal contractual side, which I think ultimately some people think is great, because you've got more power. I think that hurts everybody, because everybody is more stepping on eggshells in conversations. They don't know what they should be negotiating for, because they just have no understanding of what they're even getting themselves into in the industry, because there's just no standardization. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Where again, like UFC has that. Like, when you join the UFC, you're joining the UFC to compete competitively. And then you've got agreements for a certain amount of fights that you have in your contract based on what you do. You've got the wins, you've got the losses, you've got the rounds, you've got the knockouts, you've got the pay. And then like, it's figuring out, you sign a year deal, do you sign a 2-year deal, just get to your 2-year. And once you get to your 2-year, you can then negotiate. Like, UFC still empowers mass scale media, and at any moment in time snap their finger and make you a mega superstar. Yes, once you get to be a mega superstar, have at it, go do your own thing. That's fine. I don't think the UFC matters, because they've made tens of millions of dollars off of building your likeness. If you want to be someone that goes away, that's fine, because they're going to go find Sean O'Malley, and Sean O'Malley is going to replace Conor McGregor as long as he keeps winning. Like, there's always going to be somebody to replace that. And the UFC, from an aggregate standpoint, will make their revenue off that person, to the point where if they actually decide to leave, they're ultimately going to probably be okay with it. We've made our money off of you, and there's another hungry UFC fighter that we can then craft into the next superstar, and we'll make money off of them. You go do your own thing. Like, that's not going to be a problem for us. I don't know. Interesting topic of conversation.
Yeah, I always wonder if the script's going to flip with esports when people start cutting back their costs. The major costs for them are salaries. And I talked about a few of these topics we're talking about now, actually. If anyone's listening who wants to go back, I think it was the first in this LinkedIn audio series I did with Jerome, I always say his name wrong, and I'm going to apologize again, who's basically the largest CSGO pro play manager in the world. He manages like the GOAT and probably the second GOAT and the third GOAT of CSGO. And then also Jake Lucky was a co-host on that, obviously lots of esports experience. And then Oliver Tierney, who, aka Dick Stacey, who played for Renegades overseas many, many times as a CSGO pro player. And we do cover a few of these things. And like, some of the things they said was interesting. Part of what you were saying, Darren, like, I'm going to try to summarize in some dot points. Number one, Jeremy talked about, especially in Rocket League, the same team, like players in the same team being paid wildly different amounts of money, not necessarily for a good reason. Like, players in the same team in Rocket League will be paid like $2,000 and someone else will be paid like 15 to 20. And they also talked about what you should do as a player to, start making some content and get your name out there. So someone like Jeremy, because he's got that, added structure and support of his company, will create content for ZywOo. And it's not even that often that ZywOo will log into his own Twitter and do stuff. Yeah. It's mainly them like doing things for him. which is, fair enough. He's training for 12 hours a day, trying to be the best player in the world. So that's how that kind of stuff should work. And yeah, I think the other thing that we were talked about briefly as well was the CS Pro Players Association, which is the only one that I know of, the CSPPA. But given Jeremy's response, I don't know how bullish he is on that as a whole. It didn't seem, it seems to be that it's been helpful, but not, super crazy amazing. But,
yeah,
I think what you were saying too is maybe the esports team should spend some money on having managers who do that, who log into these players' Twitters and stuff. And it's almost like a necessary evil because they are attached on the outside to the players in the games, and they're never going to be on the inside completely. So they're just going to have to take the business risk to spend some money to grow these players to go from there, because otherwise, and back to the first point I was going to make and then forgot, was around the salaries. I wonder if that's going to, the script is going to flip where it becomes like the UFC, where, at the moment, like I saw in the past, the Oceanic Pro League here in Australia, OPL, I remember talking to a team owner there, and the OPL doesn't exist anymore because it just wasn't a viable business model, right? It got shut down after a lot of investment from VCs and teams and Riot alike. And players with like literally 400 Twitter followers were demanding $45,000 a year salaries to play in the OPL, which was getting like an average 5,000 concurrent viewers, which is just insane. It just doesn't work at all. Whereas the common discussion you see in Reddit and forums and whatever for the UFC is that the fighters are paid or well underpaid for what they do to their bodies in the training camps and stuff that they go through. And it's because the UFC holds all of the power. And I wonder if it's going to, the script is going to flip at some time where, I feel like the US, the players have 10 times the following, but command 10 times the salaries. So maybe you're a $450K salary for 400 followers, but maybe you've got, I don't know, let's say 15,000 Twitter followers and you're asking for like a $350,000 salary or something like that, which is also unsustainable. And at the moment, the VC funded teams are just paying that because that's the market price, because it's the market price. But if they all stop offering that money, what's going to happen? I'm sure some people will go out on their own, like Team Liquid's Dota 2 team left and just made their own team. You're seeing influencers come and make their own teams. You've seen it a few times before where, orgless teams have just gone because they've got enough money to sustain themselves and they go off and do what they feel like. OG was kind of like that. So, I mean, I would kind of ask some questions and make some statements at the same time, but the salary thing's always really interesting to me, and the power dynamic of the players versus the teams.
And then it's the idea of whether you have Fortnite or whether you have Call of Duty League, and like how an actual league operates versus a public esports competitive forum, which is more of what Fortnite is anyone can compete at any point in time. You don't need to join an esports org in order to be the best Fortnite player in the world or win a shit ton of money. You don't need an org. That's like, I think the whole dynamic of like the creator economy, which I love being a part of and advocating for, is like, you don't need an org to do a lot of things in the gaming space. You don't need them. And I think people join too early and then they stunt their growth because they're restrictive, because that's what the contracts are a little restrictive if you don't understand what it is that you're signing. But ultimately, as a gaming creator that competes, that I think is fascinating in games like Warzone and an Apex and Fortnite, you don't need an esports org. Like that dynamic I don't think is like hit on hard enough. Like think about that. It's very wild. There's millions of dollars being exchanged throughout those games every year with just tournament providers. That is a free to compete market. You don't need to buy a league slot. How does that impact the overall gaming and esports industry in and of itself? I don't know, but it's just, I don't think it's talked about enough that you've got 3 powerhouse game titles that every industry knows that gets tossed into esports, but the entire business model of that esport, from esports org, brand, property, tournament provider, and content creator, like it's completely different, because I don't need to join an org in order to be an esport athlete. I just log into my computer and compete. It's just like fascinating.
I'm almost surprised that more games didn't go that same route. I felt really worried for third-party esports as a whole when Fortnite started doing all those hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash cups just directly through the game launcher. Because you think then, well, what room does that leave for like a repeat.gg or like any other, challenge or any other automated tournament structure company? Where does that leave esports orgs and teams? Where does that leave everybody else? And I think,
And for some reason, like, I feel like a lot of people's perception of that is it's very like they should just kind of brush it off, where it's like, oh, it's just Fortnite doing Fortnite things, right? It's just the old freaking Tim Sweeney and Donald Mustard over there doing their thing. But it's like, hello, like, no. Like, I think a lot of those third-party tournament partners, like, you can't be delusional and think that you can't be very worried. Like, technology is not slowing down, ladies and gentlemen. Technology is getting more powerful than it's ever been. Like, yes, Call of Duty will have that. Apex will have that. Like, private lobbies will be offered to everybody. They don't need a specific third-party person to have a tournament platform. That platform will be inside of the game that can be hosted and created by everyone. That's my bullish sentiment of what Fortnite is building, is they're giving the game to the community. And if what you want to do and create and bring to life, you can do on your own, depending on if you're a player, if you're a map builder, if you're a tournament provider, if you're anything. You can do with our tools what you want to do. That's the future of where these platforms are headed. So, I mean, to your point, I think a lot of those third-party tournament platforms should be very worried. Why? And then it's more cost effective for Apex and Call of Duty. I mean, from a tech side and server space and how you moderate that, yes, those things have to be solved for, but like, just do it in the game. That, like, why have people leave your game to go do things outside of your game? I don't know. That's not the direction that I think our world is headed, is more browser based outside game companies being built adjacent to the game. I think that it's going to become more integrated in the game, because ultimately the more time players and the community spend inside the game, that just increases the likelihood of revenue for the game that the game gets to keep.
Makes sense to me, man. It's cheaper as well as I think a lot of people don't think of the IP implications. After years and years on trying to run third-party tournament stuff for clients and whatever, it's just become really hard, really restrictive. Like, we tried to do something with Rocket League in Australia. We had these people approach us who do like kids. They do like kids training camps for sport. They'll do like week-long camps, weekend camps in holidays. Plus they'll do, every Wednesday night after school. It's for kids that want to take their sport a little bit more seriously and do some training. And, they had a physical facility, which is like 3 or 4 stories they partnered with. They wanted to do like a week-long Rocket League camp or some sort of camp for kids over school holidays. A lot of international students are in Australia too. A lot of international students go to it as well for something to do over the holidays. And Rocket League's answer was like, we're good. No, thanks. And that's it. I was like, yeah, but they're like, no, actually. Because, trying to justify it internally to my staff and stuff, I thought, well, what's the risk to them? Is it more than 1%? Yeah, because it's kids in a place. What if we feed them the wrong food and someone dies, and then it's, Rocket League camp kills child by feeding them peanuts? So they're just like, no, the risk is more than 1% of my IP, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, when you start to think of what Fortnite is building with Creative Island, like, Creative Island is going to be a browser-based behavior of going to Creator Island and going to the tournament island, and the tournament is going to have a ton of people running and hosting tournaments inside of the game. Like, that's just what is being built. It's not just Epic and Fortnite doing weird things. Like, they are changing the behavior of gamers and what their expectations are for where things should be and how the interfaces are going to be looking. The whole idea of having a locker and a bundle and an Epic ID and all of that. Like, it's very fascinating that they're the most innovative right now, but I don't see them being just an outlier in the space doing this just to do it. I think they're doing this because they're the only ones, in my opinion, that are actually innovating the way that gamers interact with games. Activision and Warzone and Call of Duty, what has been so innovative in 2 years that they've brought to life? It's difficult for me to think that some of the in-game things have been innovative. They've just been cool and new, but I don't see it as innovative. but I think Epic is changing the way that behavior is made. That's Roblox and Epic. Those two games are changing the next generation of gamers, that then when they click onto a new game and they don't have those types of integrations into the game, that I have to go outside the game to go do something, it's now a nuisance. It's a disruption to me. And if you add disruptions into a consumer, you just increase the drop off, that they just become uninterested because I have to go do 6 different things in order to get what I want. It's not even worth it anymore to me. I'll just go back to what I'm comfortable with, which is where I've been playing on Roblox and Fortnite since I've been in, since I've been 6 to 7 years old. Like, they're crafting tomorrow's gamer. So what are they putting into their habits of gaming? And then how can we make sure, as a game publisher that doesn't have the younger demographic of gamer, how do we make sure that our game isn't looked at as a disrupting game to compete and play and engage with? Like, I think some of these publishers have to start looking at what Epic and Roblox is doing and figuring out how we complement the behaviors that gamers are going to be making and the actions that they make inside of that interface of being able to play the game. I'm excited to see how they innovate, because it doesn't look like they're doing anything currently to innovate like Epic and Roblox are doing.
I think
it's interesting.
And thinking from the other side, someone probably come up here and be like, Darren and Chris, you guys are so fucking negative. What's the answer? And I think the answer is, how do you make a FaZe clan? Like, what's the purpose of a team and where can they fit? And I think it's about building that brand, building that community, and building that messaging. For a long, long time, FaZe clan were by far the top of the charts of every esports team. And I remember, we did a infographic that was like Forbes team valuations versus social followers, and FaZe had like, I can't remember what the number was. It was like 6x the social followers compared to number 2, and that doesn't include any of their talent, by the way. It doesn't include FaZe Rug, who alone has more talent, who has more followers than FaZe, just by himself, let alone Banks and Rain and Apex and et cetera, down the list. And it's because they were very serious with their brand, and from people I know who are ex and internal FaZe for a long time, they were very serious about everything they do. Like, does this fit our brand? Like, is this FaZe clan? Like, is this collab who we want to be partnered with? And talking to Clinton about, when he sold, say, like the, Offset investing into them, like they had to, the OG talent had to accept that investment, and he was not allowed, like Offset, one of the most famous rappers in the world, was not allowed to just turn up to the FaZe house. He had to be invited by the talent, and they had to want him to be there, Like, they need to take that kind of stuff very seriously, where I know we've all seen for a while, like, some of the esports teams who are struggling and don't have as much of identity, they'll just sell a sponsorship because they need the money.
Correct.
And then it just doesn't fit that long-term vision of, okay, how do I fit into this market? What am I doing? I think 100 Thieves does it pretty well, but the concern for me, and I want to make some content around this, is, are 100 Thieves doing too much? Which is my experience as an agency for many years, trying to be too many things to too many people. They are pro esports. They're also content. They're also making their own tournaments. They're also making their own energy drink and a video game now too. Like, that's a lot of different businesses.
Yeah, it's like $4 billion businesses inside of one brand, which is massive. And definitely my pontification here about everything is not a negative approach. I just think it's fascinating to see the breadth of where the industry is. You've got things that are very far right and very far left, whatever your spectrums are, however you want to think about it. I just love that there's so much action going on. It's like part of my excitement of being in this industry. It's not that I think I know everything. I just love the fact that there are so many different ways to approach the space, depending on what it is that you're looking to accomplish, that there's not a right or wrong. The right or wrongness is just in the outcome. So that's ultimately, whoever's going to be right can just use the outcome of what it is that they did as the gauge of whether we accomplished something. But I think there's a place for traditional sports and third-party league-based esports. I do think that there is something there, just like I think that there is something there of building out environments and creator-driven experiences for your org inside of Fortnite and Roblox. I think there's space for both. Ultimately, to me, it just comes down to expectations. Like if you think I don't think you can build $1 billion business in the next 24 months based on one or the other, which is how esports has been raising money. So then you go back down to like peeling back the layers of the onion, as I know you talk about, Chris, is just the overall investment arm and angle of this industry. That to me is why I think a lot of failure, not necessarily the direction is going, it's more the level of expectation that's been set to people that are investing in money. I'm going to give you $1 million and I want a certain return in 5 years. Like that's what is proving to be not successful, is they over invested in too short of a runway of time to actually prove success. It's not the fact that some of these ideas aren't great. It's just, I don't believe that some of, to your point, like, great, if you want to do energy drinks or it's like, that's awesome. Each one of those ideas are phenomenal. It's more or less, well, like, what's the runway of when you have to show a return on that? And can you do that in the amount of time that you've promised? That's where I think doing too much starts to become unsuccessful, because you've promised too fast of a return. And then you get into where you mentioned before, is now you're just looking for money because you need it, not because you want to do something with it. Now you're just looking for money to just go to the next round of investment. And now you've made too many promises to too many people that you can't showcase success from. So
yeah, I've definitely seen that. I think one of the most famous or popular topics on Twitter about LinkedIn is being able to spot like an esports charlatan, an esports expert, grifter. And I think based on this discussion, I'd like to highlight to people the easiest way to spot someone is someone who can only talk about the surface level problems, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because to someone who's actually in the industry, the surface level problems are obvious. FaZe Clan stock's not doing that well. No esports public stock's doing that well. Esports orgs are laying off staff. That obviously means there's an issue. And that's usually where they stop. and then, buy my course or hire me as a consultant to fix the issue. But if they don't understand the levers that are behind that, like some of the stuff that you're discussing, like here is why, like they're doing too many things or they don't fit into the game that well, or here's some specific examples, that's when you can start to see that someone actually knows what they're talking about. It's like, can they go a layer deeper than just things aren't working? It's like, well, no shit, of course things aren't working. It's pretty obvious, but we know, and I talked about this in the podcast with Jeremy and Jake and Ollie, is like that podcast was, the podcast I did with Jeff Pabst, who was the chief revenue officer at FaZe, and Irina Shames, who was the chief revenue officer at G2. And a lot of it was kind of negative because they're both recent exits from those two companies and whatever. And I think, I had some, what's the word? Interesting DMs from people not agreeing, but also not coming up to actually challenge them, which I always would love people to do, like come up and challenge what they're saying. But I think we had to put a caveat on that.
Sime or Siem has his hand raised. Why don't we?
I'll have to bring him up then. And
I feel like I've spewed out enough pontification about the industry. I'd love for someone to disagree with me. I love these conversations.
And yeah, just to cap that off, we had to end it by saying, yes, we've been negative because that's, they're the chief revenue officers and revenue is the issue with a lot of these esports teams. But we know that there is a value in esports. I have a fucking Battlefield 2 tattoo on my leg. Like all I cared about as a kid was being better at that game. And I played CSGO and I was so clinically, insanely obsessed with CSGO that I ruined the game for myself when I was trying to be a pro in that game. And then I switched to being a commentator and a tournament operator. Like, I haven't been around in esports the past 13, 14 years, 15 years almost now just to talk shit about it. Like, it's why? Why would I be here? I may as well go sell houses or something, or go sell 100%. Used cars. Like, we know that there's value for it, but what I was saying to them and what I said to Ollie and et cetera, I was like, well, fuck, where is the value? Like, can we just find it together, please? Because we know there's tons of value in esports. We know that Fortnite has millions and millions of viewers. We know that League of Legends gets like up to 40 million concurrent viewers across China, et cetera, for their league. We know that, when the Chinese team won the League of Legends finals in 2019, was it, or something like that, there was like, it was 3 a.m. and there was like a crowd of like 8,000 people hanging out of fucking balcony windows, waving flags, like going crazy. Like, we know that there's value in it, but it's just obvious that things aren't being done correct. So it's like, what can be done that's better? And that's why we're having these discussions. And that's why I'm hosting the event in LA that I'm organizing. trying to do some roundtables and get these people together to not just take pot shots and be fuckwits on Twitter and try to just get more followers by talking shit about someone else, or like, I know more than you, but I'm not going to tell you the answer. Like, why don't you just sit around a table together? And for me, it's like, can I get Nadeshot and FaZe Banks and someone from Riot to sit at a table together and be like, what can we learn from each other? Yeah. How can Riot learn to do pop culture better from FaZe or something? Like, how can 100 Thieves teach FaZe how to do X, Y, Z better, and like leave some of the egos at the door and like just have a bit of a discussion. And I always go back to the best example of that is, and I came up with that idea because the National Basketball League here in Australia, the NBL, was a failing sport, got bought by a guy called Larry Kesselman. They got laughed out of all of the major broadcasters when they tried to sell a broadcast deal. And now they're like one of the biggest sports in Australia. They've got multiple broadcast deals on the table, doing very well. And they hosted a roundtable back in like 2018 kind of time, which was, we want to help esports. How can we help? And sitting at that table were like esports team investors, owners, some top players, brands like Intel was there, Nvidia was there, big retailers were there. Everyone was represented. And it was moderated by the man himself, Larry Kesselman, who's worth close to $1 billion. And, I want to replicate that kind of success, that good discussion where you can just sit at a table and talk about a problem together. And the main problem with Australian esports then and now is commercialization. It's just way too infant, especially compared to the US. And that's what the NBL does best. They got a laundry list of 1 billion sponsors and they do very well. So that was the end answer of that. And actually came out with a good income, with a good outcome, which was like, hey, you need to help us commercialize. You got the contacts to the brands, how do their reporting, how to sell to them? Like, can you help us out with that? So
super cool.
We'll bring CM up. Hopefully saying it right. And if anyone else wants to come up, you just have to click raise your hand. Come and tell us we're wrong. Argue with us. Tell us we're right. I don't care. I just want to chat.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good, thanks.
Doing well. So my name is CM. I'm an administrative member for Empire Arcadia. We're the world's most documented esports team. Let me just say, listening to you guys have this conversation takes me back to some conversations from 01 when esports was getting, we had Halo, we had Melee coming up into the stage, and there was virtually the same discussions happening in regards to, let's get industry experts, let's get Nintendo involved, let's get Microsoft if we can. And I think, to Darren's credit in this conversation, whether you're right or wrong can only be seen in your outcomes. Like it's great. It's great to have Intel or Riot to be part of the discussion, but let's just take it from the example. From a collective organization, you have players that compete on the team. But if I or Joe Schmo or Sally, so-and-so can't name your players, if I can't name them like Ninja or Dream or KDZ or anyone else that is prolific in their respective game, there's a disconnect. There's a problem that I think could be solved with just as easy as like, hey, post content, turn the life of this athlete into something digestible for your audience to understand just how rigorous the sport may be, how worth it is. You can. There's so many opportunities, but you don't see that happening. But I do notice it with VaynerSports currently, and this is not to kiss up or anything. I was really ecstatic when Bunga signed on, and I thought that was the right direction. I thought other players would go in that direction and take up marketing. For example, and I'll cut it brief. Let's look at the Pokemon community. That is the world's biggest intellectual franchise. Like it's Pokemon. Everyone knows it. Your kids know it. And I'm looking at the former champions like Wolf Glick create mom and pop shops of Pokemon merchandise, bring YouTubers, other celebrities, if you will, and introduce them to the game, bring in these tie-ins that not only just like strike up in views currently, but give everyone a way to remember that this is a shared community, a shared space. Anyone can get involved, anyone can play and have fun. I think that's the direction a lot of esports orgs need to think about. But I'd like to hear you guys' opinion.
Yeah, I mean, agree with you. I like VaynerSports too. but I think you're right. But I think also, like, when you think of just the business side of it, it's also where some of the problems lie, is that communities don't have P&Ls. Right. That's where I think a lot of the problems occur, is that people are too lovey-dovey and feel good, and they forget that they have to pay the electric bill and they have talent to pay. So, like, I think I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, but I think there's also the issue that Pokemon, I think, is also one of those game titles that knows the power of their IP, but like, it's, again, everyone knows Pokemon, but I can't name you a tournament sponsor that puts on Pokemon tournaments. I know what Pokemon is. They hold the
exactly.
So they kind of let people, they can use their IP or they don't use their IP. It doesn't necessarily impact their bottom line, but that's to make it relative to this conversation of an esports org. Everyone knows Call of Duty, the game title, but not everybody knows one of the esports orgs that are playing in Call of Duty. Just fill in the blank. I don't want to call anybody out, but I think that's
right.
That would, in my opinion, would be the analogy. Is it has nothing to do with the magnitude of the IP of the game itself, because you can't rely on the game's IP, and you can't rely on the game itself to drive your bottom line revenue with your business. Like, you can't think of your esports org as just a community development opportunity, because investors don't invest in those types of companies. And then you're not a nonprofit. People aren't donating to you to cultivate a community around their game title. You have to pull a profit, and you have to build a product and a service. Like, how do you do that with that game title? So anyway, I'm just giving you my thoughts on your question. I agree with you on the sentiment, but I think some of the sentiment leads to poor business decisions, because people try to grow communities and not grow businesses. And growing a community, you can't just sit in front of an investor and emotionally sell them on the community that you're going to build. You have to show them what the product and service is that you're creating, and what problem in the marketplace your business is going to go solve for. And a community doesn't solve a problem.
Yeah. Adding to what you're saying, Darren, by definition, esports is a marketing tool. It's a user retention tool and a user acquisition tool and a loss leader. So if your entire business is based around the loss leading part of a product, and you're not receiving the benefits of what that loss leader is driving towards, which is player retention and player acquisition, then that's just a problem, I think, in itself. I think if you think about it as simply as that. And to add to what you're saying as well, Darren, around like the communities are big and the games and the IPs are massive. Like, here's something else for you. Like, I in quotation marks own and operate one of the largest Pokemon Go Facebook groups in the world. And I haven't done anything for that group in about 4 years. It's all my moderators that do everything for that. And it's specifically Pokemon Go Melbourne, right? So only just my city / my state. We have 23,000 monthly active members in there, which is just crazy to me with nothing happening. But it's all for the love of Pokemon. And that community ferociously moderates itself. Like, they're ferocious with their moderation. If you post anything that's even only loosely based on Pokemon, they will shoot you the hell down instantly. But I made some money at the start by doing Pokemon walks and stuff, but in the same way as like esports, I've really struggled to find like, how do I actually make money out of it? I tried like a lot of referral links to power banks and things like that. I tried, partnering with local businesses to do Pokemon Go walks. And that's the only thing that really worked, is we'd start a Pokemon Go walk at a kebab place, and they'd pay me like, back in the day, was this like 2015 or something, 2016, they pay me like $50, $100, and then I'd finish the walk at a bar, and they'd pay me another $50, $100, and that's about all I could do. I partnered with a dude who sold power banks out of his like hand luggage to people, because especially phones in those days, the batteries weren't very good, and Pokemon Go was draining them. But I've just struggled so hard in all these years to think about like, hey, I've got this extremely focused, massive community. How could I actually sell things to them? It's like, it's almost impossible to solve that. And maybe I'm starting to realize that it could be kind of similar to some of the esports stuff.
Spot on. Well said.
100%. When I referenced Pokemon earlier, I meant as in, you've actually said it very beautifully, esports or the displaying of competitive gaming. Like it could be a small tourney with friends, family, you put on live stream. It's like you mentioned, a loss leader. It's a way to retain any of the followers or users and then funnel them into something else, like big one being merch or any other incentives that you can think of to continue developing this community or this brand.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like you're hitting on in a simplified fashion, which I think is helpful for the esports industry to think about themselves in more of a simplified business model. But like we're bringing up like a perfect, like we're hitting the nail on the head with the issue of esports is you're just a lost leader of a community side program that cultivates a certain amount of people all together that all like to compete and play in this game title. But that's not a business. Yeah, that, again, like Chris, no offense to the phenomenal community that you've built, because it sounds like you're still super invested in them. But if you deleted that group right now, if I hacked in and deleted that group for you, Pokemon is going to be just as successful tomorrow.
Yeah,
and I think
that's what I mean. I feel like the group, you just feel like such an outsider. I think that's part of why I haven't done anything for years. The moderators are so passionate that they just run
again,
everything.
and you have to have passion, which is phenomenal. Like, again, all of this stuff is great, and it's what makes up the culture of the industry. It's phenomenal. Like, it's so great to see groups like that people moderate and do for free, and you connect with people. All of this is phenomenal for the passion and the emotional attractment to the industry. But as a business, like, again, there's a lot of esports orgs that could go out of business, and the games themselves wouldn't see an impact at all. And in that statement lies, in my opinion, the ultimate problem with the esports org industry and category in our life, is that they could all go away and it wouldn't impact the game that much, maybe a little bit, but they don't make necessarily money off of these esports orgs at all. The players are going to play the game regardless. The media and entertainment side are hosted by third parties. That's another interesting topic of conversation. Like, do publishers have to have some skin in the game, right? That's a whole different conversation to be had. Like, if you want to hold them accountable for some of this stuff, like, they've got to have some skin in the game or feel a little bit of the heat when the industry is on the downslope, like what it is right now. But an entire industry in esports.
I spoke to a publisher about this, by the way, like under NDA, so I can't say who it is, but I spoke to a publisher who runs a large esport, and it's a new person got brought in to kind of manage the entire IP, like across everything, across just the traditional game and development and sequels and like whatever they want to do. And had a bit of an open chat with him under NDA, and he was asking that question to his team, is like, okay, what games are bigger than us in esport and in general? What happens tomorrow if we turn off our esport? Do we lose 50% of our player base? Do we gain it? Like, why are we spending this loss leading money? Like, why are we losing millions of dollars? Like, justify it to me. And from him, and his frustration was the internal team couldn't justify it to him either. They were like, we just do it, we spend it, and we just got a budget set, and the budget's spent. And we all know, like, so many businesses have this. So many businesses spend, I remember learning this lesson early when I got into business, where my salesperson's yearly budget for putting stickers, like massive banners in shop windows physically, was the same as my marketing budget for gaming and esports and influencers and Facebook at my first job. But it's because it serves a different purpose, because it pays them to care about you. You know what I mean? You can't just bribe them to care about you. So you got to pay for some bullshit so they'll care about you, So sometimes there's those underlying motives as well. I also, once again, under NDA, but I'll be a bit general with it. I know an international esports team, a tier 1 team, who has their sponsor simply because the sponsor's board were getting a presentation to them about esports, and the new board leader, president, whatever, said, what's the biggest prize pool esport in the world? And then they replied with the esport, and they said, go sponsor a team in that. Goodbye. Don't ask any more questions. So sometimes these things just happen, and other times it's kind of planned.
Category of all this is just straight up prize pools. I mean, you want to talk about how to get more players into your game. I mean, I think Fortnite was the one that popped the top off the industry with the Fortnite World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about onboarding a generation of Fortnite players by incentivizing them with this wild experience of being able to win that much money. And again, it's the idea that even if people didn't think that they had a chance to win, it's that's where that cult community vibe comes from. It's like, we're all trying, even though the majority of people didn't, and only one person won. It's like that everyone, a lot of people, not everyone, there were a lot of people that started to play Fortnite once that announcement came out. So you think of just like a cost-effective approach to, Fortnite didn't put paid digital media necessarily behind that announcement. Maybe they did, but it was the announcement that just people started to reshare the fact that you could potentially make that much money playing a video game. That in and of itself was their marketing budget. The marketing budget was the announcement of that large of a prize pool. And that in and of itself incentivized this next generation of people to open a free game to compete in. And now Fortnite is what it is today. But prize pools are super interesting to just explore. And then it seems like every other week Warzone has $100,000 prize pool that somebody's hosting, where like Fortnite doesn't have that. You've got that cap of what you can do from a third-party prize pool if you're not a partnered person or approval from Epic. But nonetheless, like Valorant, Apex, like you just get a really wealthy person to put together a large prize pool, structure a league around it. Boy, you got a competitor.
So of course, after you.
I was going to say, the user acquisition thing, by the way, I kind of skimmed over it. It is very true. I've been playing Dota 2 since 2015 because of the international. Like, it acquired me as a user. I was a League of Legends player. Dota 2 was too hard. And then I watched TI. It was either 2014 or 15. I don't remember which one, TI 4 or 5. And it was fucking amazing. And I've been playing Dota 2 ever since. And now, however many years later this is, I've got thousands of hours in Dota 2 and I buy the battle passes every time. So we know it works. Yeah. And also, like our investor, Playside Studios, they're, in quotation marks, Australia's largest publicly listed games development company. And our office used to be physically located in theirs for our first couple of years of business. And I would see it. Like when there was a Fortnite World Cup on, I would see before work and during lunchtime and after work, people, because they're obviously all gamers, they make games, they're playing Overwatch. And when Intel Extreme Masters CSGO came up, they were all playing CSGO at lunchtime. And, copy paste Dota 2 TI, they're all playing Dota 2. And you can just see it. People start to get invested and interested and follow the storylines and that stuff. And then it's up to the game to retain them, once they've got that interest in them. But it definitely works. You can see that. You can see even from, Dota 2 tournaments and CSGO majors and minors, you can see the players uptick on Steam. It's, just go to Steam charts, just Google, Steam player number CSGO, and you can follow the trends up and down. They go up when a new patch comes out generally, but it also goes up when, an esports tournament happens. So it definitely works. And then for an example, for people thinking, well, okay, are the publishers just selfish and do they do nothing? No, once again, with Jeremy, et cetera, we talked about an individual player. If you're in a major, so they often sell capsules and stickers, right, for teams when you're in a Valve supported tournament in CS:GO. An individual player themselves can net $100,000 in their pocket after everything, after fees from their team and taxes and et cetera, just out of playing with that. And that's if you're like the 14th ranked team. If you reach like Legends, no one could tell me how much that is, but they just tell me it's a lot more than that for a player. So from talking to some orgs, depending on what their split percentage is, but from talking to Australia's largest esports org, if they make it to a Valve major event, even if they come 15th out of 16th or 16th out of 16th, that's paid for their entire CSGO team for the entire year, just out of, in quotation marks, guaranteed kind of sticker sale money right there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a super, super interesting.
Yeah. And obviously, like we're saying too, in team games, esports orgs definitely have a larger part to play than in individual games because they provide you with the infrastructure of a coach, a chef, a house, training facilities, boot camps, contacts, all that kind of stuff, you know? Like it's much more. But some people do it themselves. I mean, Greyhound, who then became Renegades, who are now Greyhound again, it's one guy. Like Mr. Greyhound is his name on Twitter, and he does basically all of that stuff for them just by himself. He manages the team house, he manages the players, he's the team mum, you know what I mean? He travels with them. He does everything hands-on. And, you know, when Renegades were Voxy, the old Renegades were Voxy, then became Renegades, and now they're all over the place, you know, with Dexter and Sponge and whoever else, you know, the commentators or retired or playing for other teams. That was Chris, or AKA Gomez. He was like the team mum, you know, he was their hands-on manager and everything. And the org was just kind of there to help provide them financially because they didn't have world championships. They didn't have a ton of personal money. You know, I mean, unless they did, I don't know the personal situation, but, you know, they're not big creators who can just bankroll themselves and pay themselves a salary. You know, they needed the team to help to pay them and send them to Detroit to do boot camps and that kind of stuff when they were Detroit Renegades, you know. But once again, like if you're able to get that money and you're not too stressful about it, then you can just do it yourself.
Yeah, and there's value in esports orgs. It's just that business model that they've created this callus around, I think, has to be scraped off, so to speak. And it just has to become it just has to be different, and you can't. I just think every org was built on media and entertainment, and like that's how.
But there's a reason.
Yeah.
This was how you would create an organization, because this was let's history, right? People used to do grassroots. They'd invite friends over to a house, sleep on the floor, practice the Hadouken so many times, it just so that when they get into that one moment, like as maybe some of you guys in the audience are familiar with, when Justin Wong just killer combination right into the championships of his match. We saw what potential is, but in order to continue sustaining it, you had to go into, as you mentioned, the sort of run and done routine. I think the future of esports relies on a organization that is flexible enough to support its local communities, as well as you guys talked about earlier, like the players' individual brands. And then collectively, the organization can use that as leverage to support up-and-coming video game titles. I think it's too late with, unless, Riot changes the terms, or, like let's just say currently right now, in Roblox, if you create a game and people play it, I think the monetization on there is about, you earn 24%. Am I correct on that? Maybe a little less? If Fortnite went into that same direction, and if other games like, hey, you can use our platform in-game to make levels, make Kaizo versions of Fortnite maps, have super difficulty, but your revenue, if people start spending coins, V-Bucks, however you call it, if you get like 10%, I don't think players or developers are going to look into that with a keen eye. And I mentioned ecosystem in the past, or local communities. What we've done in our esports team was, after so many winning, we decided that we should support, schools, students who are looking into that next step. Because I think, Chris, as you mentioned, those prize pool money, it can be 500, 5,000. But do you want to know what $500 does when you live in Jamaica? When you live in a part of the world where the US dollar translates to a lot more than just a one-on-one comparison. And getting those organizations set up, those communities game ready, takes a lot of resources, time, dedication, capital. And I think there can be a lot of good. Like I'm curious, I'm rambling here, but I think the sentiment that I'm trying to say is that, very clear to what Darren was pointing at, we need to uphold the current ecosystem of esports and start from the ground. I'm curious, though, because we've talked about it at length here on what the problems are. I'm curious if you guys seen any potential solutions that are being developed right now in 2023.
To me, it just comes back to branding once again. Like, what is your brand? Who are you? Like, if you were to ask me who is FaZe, who is 100 Thieves, I could give you a very clear answer. if you were to look at the rest of the Forbes top valued esports teams, you know, as per their article, I would struggle to differentiate what a lot of those different teams are. And I mean, another sport that you guys probably have zero idea about, cricket, but Australian cricket, I think, is going through the same thing. When I grew up, we had kind of this untouchables team where not only we were winning everything, but everybody was a character. We had like all of these different characters in our team.
Exactly.
I've got a friend right now who's quite close with top level cricket, and it's his assumption that it's kind of bred out of them now, and that all of the cricket players in Australia right now are about as interesting as a warm bag of milk. And even though we are still winning, like we're currently beating India in India, which is virtually impossible, and our women's team just won another World Cup in the height of like, this is the biggest that women's sports have ever been in the history of sports. Don't hear about it at all because no one cares. None of them are interesting at all. And like I watched, they did like a Drive to Survive type thing on cricket. They did it on Prime called The Test. And just, man, like one of the guy's redeeming qualities was he likes to make coffee. Like that's not a personality. You know, but like in the past, like you had Shane Warne, who passed away almost a year ago today. He's the cricket goat, and he was just, you know, just oozing so much personality, like a chubby cricketer who dates supermodels, who takes like 30 tins of baked beans with him to India because he just eats like bread and baked beans only kind of thing. And the way the clothes he would wear, the way he would talk, you know, the things he would do, like it's just such a personality. You just don't have that now. But if you can highlight those, like I think Red Bull's done a fantastic job for OG, you know, to highlight that stuff too. Going to Thompson's family living in the middle of nowhere in Finland in the snow and talking about like what he was like growing up and how he played games. And, you know, I think they did a fantastic job. I suggest anyone look that stuff up. Going to Seb's family in France and seeing how close they are as a family unit and how he grew up playing video games and all that kind of stuff, you know, like you need to like tell the stories and set the branding. I think OG is another one. If you were to ask me who they are, I could tell you who OG is. But with a lot of these other esports teams, and I saw this happen also firsthand in Australia, is that so many different teams, they're like, our branding is we win games. Like, no, that's not. That's not brand. Yeah. Like you don't, you know, Conor McGregor has the double champ thing, but you know, it's not about that. It's about the stuff he says and what he did and who he is as a person, you know, and Sean O'Malley's like that. You know, for a long time, he was only just beating up cans basically, but still with millions and millions of followers because he's looks like a mumble rapper bag of trash, but he's actually quite insightful and interesting. And he's like got lots of deep layers to who he is, you know? And that's what you need to do. Like you need to be able to highlight that stuff. And for him, he does it himself. He invested all of his own money into doing that and working with Optic and playing in esports comps. And now he's signed with Complexity Stars and things like that too, right? But you know, you need to tell that story. It's all storytelling and it's all branding and positioning. And I'm not a branding guy, but it's obvious that for a long time, FaZe were doing it very well. So it's like, just ask yourself, like major brands in any industry, like if you can define their brands, they're usually pretty popular. Like Apple versus Android, it's pretty obvious to tell the difference between those two, to the point where there's that common standing debate that's gone for like 3 generations now of an Android user versus an Apple user. It's very common, you know. It's like, can you do that in esports and gaming? And the same way you can for video games. Like if you were to ask me, and I have to explain this a lot to people outside of video games as a whole, you know, the boomers, because they think that every game is the same. And you can just explain, like I can explain very easily to you the cliche of a Call of Duty gamer versus a CSGO gamer versus a Battlefield gamer versus StarCraft versus League of Legends versus Dota. They're all very different people, but you can't necessarily do that for the orgs.
Yeah. And then it's to your, you know, when you laid out like what the value is of the orgs, I mean, it's like it's creating customers out of orgs. And then like, which is why I think the direction and the sentiment of what 100 Thieves is trying to do is right. I think the direction is correct. I think like being able to create some sense of diversified and owned products that it goes beyond just brands and sponsorships. I think that's the right approach. It's just, yeah, again, they've built the callus based on what they said they were, and now they look like they're just stretching to try to do things to do it because they see, you know, and feel these headwinds coming up. But I think like if you could start an esports org today, it's like you would add that into your strategic plan moving forwards, is diversifying different products that you could potentially own, whether that's owning technology underneath players and viewers and customers. It's like you just look at esports orgs and they don't own anything. And I just feel like there's just such a weird thought to think of these companies that are valued at hundreds of millions of dollars, and they don't have a product. To your point, winning is not a product.
Exactly.
That's an outcome, and you want to do that, but then it's like, what do you own? And then they're like, they don't even have super robust like loyalty marketing programs and reward points. Like they're not getting the ultimate value out of this onslaught of new fans to the org in and of themselves. They just take new viewership and new media metrics and charge a higher price point to a brand partner. It's anyways, I don't mean to just continue to point out problems, but it's just
no. But you pointed out potential solutions at the same time. If naming 100 Thieves, why not? Going in, creating video games or new ways to engage with fans, always a plus. But if you don't have the chops to back it up, and I'm an investor and I have no clue about the space, and I'm told you're one of the best, I'm going to assume you're doing a good job, right? Even though, from an outside perspective, you could be creating those premium memberships, those one-on-one type interactions. If you're into technology, you could be working on you can have an inset team that creates levels for you in Roblox, and you play it with your fans, or you do something more engaging. Maybe there's some sort of, I keep saying membership, I think of Patreon. This way you're monetizing those interactions at a way that your consumers are already familiar with. There's no additional learning curve because it's already set in stone. I don't see this happening though with 100 Thieves. I don't see this happening in FaZe Clan enough. And that's what some of the next generation of esports teams are going to have to figure out.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too. Even with what happened in 2019, to go back to how we started the conversation, Chris, with Dignitas. Dignitas is part of new Meta Entertainment, which is more of like a holding company, right? It's a company that has an esports team as a vertical, but then it's building it in like. The esports team is a team inside of a larger ecosystem of businesses that are all moving to the same drumbeat. I think that's an interesting component as well. And I'd be curious, Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts on it too, because I know you're close to a lot of the orgs and investment properties that are looking at orgs. Like I feel like the acquisition of companies, like again, I think Pepsi could acquire an esports org rather than sponsoring one. If you start to look at the expense of using marketing budget to partner and use as marketing spends in esports and gaming, why not just buy the whole damn thing out and just own it? Like why?
I've been over this. I've been over that thinking exercise with some brands before. So like we were the global exclusive influencer agency for Unicorn for a while, a wagering company. And we all know how unreliable influencers can be, especially when then compound that when you're working with wagering influencers. And we always had the discussion of, okay, do we just invest the money to build our own product rather than relying on someone else to do it? Like, do we build our own leagues? Do we build our own influencers? Do we build our own social channels larger? And I think most people are doing that today. Like every company, there was a quote from someone, I always forget, but it's, and this was a couple of years ago, within 10 years, every company will be a media company. And they essentially are. Every consumer company is making a TikTok. Every consumer company is posting on LinkedIn, and their executives are posting on LinkedIn. They're on Twitter, et cetera, right? And I think that might be the way that people go. And hey, back that other bit of conversation we had too, another example that people should look up If you're looking for an example of how to brand a team in jiu-jitsu, look up and maybe some search terms for you. Search BJJ, which is brilliant jiu-jitsu, and look up B team. So basically, there was this all-star team in jiu-jitsu called the Danaher Death Squad, and they were just winning everything. And they split basically in half due to some differences. And the team who weren't the top, you call them fighters, I guess. They don't even call themselves fighters. The top athletes, the ones who weren't the top athletes, they went and made the B team. And their whole branding is a joke around how they keep getting second place all the time. And their two biggest personalities, Nicky Rod and Craig Jones being an Aussie and a real Aussie larrikin type guy, their whole thing is they always come second. And they've both got 2 silver medals at World Championships. And that's just hilarious because they're some of the best, jiu-jitsu athletes in the world, and they put out a lot of amazing content on their YouTube. But I think people should check that out too. A lot of good reaction content, interview content, breaking down, what happened in the UFC fight when there's lots of submissions, all that kind of stuff. But, people just love their branding. They love the fact that they lean into the fact that they're not the best, that they always come second place. So, I mean, that's another way to look at it too.
So what we're noticing then is brands are going to have to develop a lot more ethos within their audience or consumer base, right? Especially if we're talking about video game players and how they tap into their audience. I know 10 years, everyone might become a media, but I'm curious from the perspective of video games themselves, how many of them are going to enter game development themselves? I always thought the perfect esports organization would have the following. They would have obviously a division for their athletes and a division that would just be on top of streaming, content creation. You would know them and you would know the organization they're associated with, and thus they would be the segue to the players. So yeah, while the players are doing their 9 to 5, just training or up, you'd have these commenters, these influencers that everyone's already aware of that could, hey, let me introduce you to number 1 player in the world, or number 2, or number 3. And then on the third side, you have the innovation, which I think an esport team should consider players who understand the game mechanics, who can develop their own, say, UGC or... And see, there's not a lot of games that allow you to do this. I think of Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite currently, but I think the future would be games that enable more user-generated content. So if you did have your private lobbies and your private servers, you could create something more fantastic than what the game has to offer at default. But I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts.
I think if the topic's on...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if the topic's on orgs making their own games, I'd say hell no. Games are so hard to make and they're so expensive. I just don't, as much as I love 100 Thieves, my hot take is I really don't think it's a good idea. And my right-hand man Bax has been a game lead artist and producer. He was like PlaySide's 4th employee. He came across to us when they were about 80. He's made tons of different games, single off live service, across mobile, PC, AR, VR, and we talk about this a lot. And it's really interesting from a competitive standpoint, me talking to him about how things operate and then him telling me how things work behind the scenes, like movement and CSGO and why certain guns just feel the way they do due to like where it's positioned and the animation and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, dude, it's so fucking hard to make a video game. It's so hard to make a really good video game, I would say, or even a good one. I mean, we saw that in Web3. All of these people who just aren't gamers and have never made games before suddenly thought they were going to raise $100,000 and make Call of Duty. And we saw the results of that. And they were all just shit, really. Even the ones that raised $5 million were kind of shit. Someone broke it down really well. I need to find that thing again, but they basically published an article on why essentially no Web3 video game company has raised enough money to make a good game. And he just broke it down in simple terms. Like, these are the salaries that you need. These are how many roles you need to hire. These are how many hours / months / years they need to work. And here's how much money it costs. And they just not raise enough money to meet those expectations, to make what they want to make. So yeah, sticking on that point, I just don't think it's a good idea to make a game. I talked to FaZe Clan about this back in 2019 as well, when I first had Jeff and Clinton on my podcast, and they were thinking about it. And that's what they told me. One of the two told me they've been thinking about it for a long time. But yeah, I just don't think it's that great. And we saw that even with, Dr. Disrespect partnered with that game, right? The one by Hi-Rez. It's like a third person competitive search and destroy. What happened to that game? They did a really good marketing campaign together too. They did like a whole fake scenario of him being like, these maps are shit, I could make a better map. And then they tweeted at him and they're like, yo, yeah, do it then if you think you're so good. And they released a map together like in like 5 days, which tells you that it wasn't real. They already had it planned. But what happened to that game? I can't even remember the name of it. So please, someone tell me.
I don't mean make a so what I do right now is game develop, and I'm into building AI tools and stuff for specifically that. But no, I agree with you. I what I meant was a division of division within the organization that would specialize in creating UGC content, because I see that. Let's bring a random team. Let's just say FaZe. Created a map or a world that players or fans can interact and use as a hub to continuously be involved with their content. So, like, for example, the Fortnite creative worlds or creative islands. I have an island of my own that is free. Everyone can enter, buy my merch, be involved in some way. Like, that's what I meant. You wouldn't... Unless you had, the billions of capital to spend on R&D, and so I would not. No. But use traditional games, use what is currently available to create your own content around your brand. That's what I meant. And even
Misfits
then, would you be disagreeing?
Yeah, Misfits does it for externals. Like before they launched their creator fund, I went to go see them in Boca for the second time, and they had like a staff of like 6 or 7 people there who just launched that guy's Minecraft server, whose name I forget. So yeah, they definitely do some of it. What's up, Josh? Welcome.
Hey guys, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. And I got to preface this with I have to go in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to hear you out.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for having me. The recent conversation that you guys are having is particularly keen of interest to me about UGC, especially within Fortnite Creative. That's actually what I do. So I'm the CEO for Creative, and we're a developer studio, and we focus on creating like branded games or esports games. We've done a lot recently within Fortnite Creative. And I got to say, CM and Chris, Darren, we've spoken before.
Of course. Yeah.
But you guys are both right. I think that you're both right. Creating your own game is not the right way to go. It's far too expensive, and the big risk there is whether or not you have the audience that is following your organization to be able to back that up and make that successful and make a return off of it. The unique opportunity that Fortnite Creative has specifically for like these UGC platforms. First of all, it's a lot different from Minecraft and Roblox, other very popular UGC platforms, in that Fortnite actually offers something that I think competitive esports players and organizations actually want, which is a good game engine that actually has good gunplay and we can build decent competitive modes. You're just not seeing stuff like that in Roblox. Nobody wants to play an esport game where you're walking around as giant, cheese blocks. But through Fortnite Creative, and especially here with what everybody's calling 2.0, UEFN, the next creative version of Fortnite Creative that's coming out, the tool set to be able to create games within there is easily accessible and massive. So it's going to give anybody that wants to, any orgs, the ability to, at much lower expense, be able to create their own unique game or whatever they want within a platform that already has millions of players and is also, a very popular game for most of their player base. I think a great idea would be, you spoke about Booga with Dignitas earlier. I think a great example of this would be if Dignitas would just take a small budget, hire some developers in Fortnite Creative to make a competitive style experience. It could be like a practice island kind of thing where competitive players in Fortnite can go and they can practice for the next FNCS or something. Like aim training or practice your building or something. And this can be decked out with Dignitas branding and everything. And then they can create kind of a social strategy around that as well, where they're more influential members, such as BIGR, can live stream or promote on their social media the use of the applications. Yeah, play and compete. Come join BIGR, play on this island. And
you're spot on. One of the frustrating things, we had a partnership with, we still do, Boog is an investor in a company called Step, which is a digital banking company for teens. It's like their market of like older teens and young 20s. They're like the new next generation of banking. We did that and we had a map, but the functionality, as you know best, Josh, the functionality of yesterday's creative, like there's a cap on how crazy and cool you can get to, and then there's a massive chasm in between in game and then outside of game, and that was very frustrating. They didn't have leaderboards, so you couldn't even like keep track of who's playing. So there was a lot of like the infrastructural slips that we couldn't do what we wanted to do. But moving forward, to your point of Fortnite developing the infrastructure for you to bring great ideas to life is like being able to connect, like as we're trying to build now with Step, like we want to bring this to life with some exciting announcements that they've got coming up, is being able to, and if anyone's in the audience that knows the Web3 space, and Chris, you know it the best, is like the play to earn component of what NFTs and Web3 used to be, of this idea of playing a game and earning money from it. And that just obviously went down the trash chute with all the hucksters and characters that were just scamming people with coins that mean nothing. Like, think about that opportunity of being able to connect, and I'll just use Step, but this is for anything. Like, imagine if you could connect the payment system inside of the map that you're building with Fortnite, and based on your accomplishments of how much you're improving inside of that game, you're actually rewarded with some level of Starbucks points, Delta miles, lift things, step points. Like, you're starting to bridge that gap, and I hate using that, but everyone knows what it means, is like what's happening inside of this gaming platform and environment that you're building and you're incentivizing people to play on also adds real world value to yourself. Like, and that to me opens up this breadth of creativity. You get people to play something, and what do they get from playing and enjoying and hanging out? You've got moderation, you've got leaderboards, you've got points, you've got just pure, strictly competitive. You've got your own UGC inside of that map that you're creating. Like, there's so much that you can do inside of those worlds that I feel like gets very exciting when you then start to take out the value from the game into IRL. And I think moving forwards, as you're at the forefront, Josh, is building these experiences that are amazing, but also thinking of them as more of just the end destination, but that there's this vehicle of business that's happening inside of these maps and worlds that are incentivizing people to turn on Fortnite and go to the Josh map. Because in the Josh map, I know I'm going to be able to do all these amazing things. And then you think of just the living and breathing sense of that, right? Every gamer waits for the update. Well, what if the updates happens every single day, or it happens every Thursday, or like these worlds that owners of these maps can put things and take away and add and change and revise. And then you start to build that narrative around every Thursday, the first hour of that map, you get to do something, but then at the end it goes away. Like, there's so much that you can do. And that to me is the exciting component of where this gaming world moves forward. To your point, Josh, is that's a place where esports orgs can dominate. They should dominate, and then use that to then monetize with brand partners. The fact that esports orgs are allowing brands to be more innovative than they are inside of Fortnite with creative maps like that, they're already behind. Brands should never be the ones that are innovating. That cannot happen. They should always be the laggards. So if brands are ahead of you in the race of innovation, you're really far behind. Esports org should absolutely be investing in that. And that's one of the reasons why BIGR signed with Dignitas. Dignitas is investing. They believe in that. They're going to be at GDC, I'm sure, as you are, Josh, in a couple of weeks to hear a lot of these updates.
Absolutely.
Going to be down in some of those other meetings that are connecting map builders with creators, with orgs and IP, and how everyone can work together and get a creator code split of which we haven't even talked about, is that in-game revenue split that people use with creator codes. I mean, that's real money from real people buying real things. Epic is going to start to play around with that. Like that's a massive revenue model that people aren't even thinking about from esports orgs.
Yeah, and it's a revenue model as well that we expect changes from. Tim Sweeney himself has mentioned upcoming new ecosystem for Fortnite UGC, which we expect to be some instead of what is now the the support prompt where you have to input a code to, that'll still exist and everything, but specifically with the games that are made within Fortnite Creative, we expect it's going to be something along the lines of like a rating system or a pay-per-play kind of format. So there's a lot of potential to bring in significant revenue if any orgs or even brands in general, they're doing it much more, like you said already, they're getting it figured out. But if esports orgs are able to get their foot in the door here, they could make some real money, especially if they have the social backup and the community behind them to, push their game forward to the forefront of this platform with millions of players and, with a high rating and everything. They can engage with their community, say, hey, go rate the map and everything. It'll be great. It'll shoot up to the top of the platform. And now all of a sudden they're just turning their turnover with their return is just going to be huge after that. So the investment into doing that in the beginning is kind of a no-brainer because as long as they do it right, the opportunity to make a return off that and eventually continue to profit, as well as have an existing platform within a game that your community is based in, for them to directly engage with your organization. And you spoke on there being, of course, with Fortnite Creative right now, there's a lot of limitations, and we expect some of those to go away here with the new tool coming out here sometime soon. But yeah, there's frustrations with it where you're not able to have an ongoing global leaderboard. You cannot create financial incentives within the game itself. But there are opportunities. Say 100 Thieves creates their own esports game. They can create, when we've done it before, follow a Call of Duty model or create something from Valorant. You can essentially kind of replicate the experiences that you have in a lot of these other very popular esports titles. You can replicate that to a certain degree within Fortnite Creative and bring in those same experiences. And now they can start running their own tournaments. Go to our Discord, get connected, get approved to be competing in this tournament. Whoever wins gets a cash prize. They can run that all externally outside of Fortnite Creative. And then not only is it a great way to have a community that engages with them directly, but it's also a great opportunity for recruitment. We've seen Nick Merckx has been doing his MFAM gauntlets regularly, and we actually built one for a couple of months ago, and they ran an MFAM gauntlet in Fortnite Creative. That was a really exciting project. But the opportunity there, and we've seen it through the gauntlet, is that early competitors, they have an opportunity to have that platform to be able to succeed. And, like Scoped, everybody knows who Scoped is now. He rose up through playing MFAM gauntlets through a couple of different games. Like they were running like Fortnite Battle Royale ones. And then he rose to the top of that. And now everybody knows who he is. So they can do that. They can have like an housing for internal recruitment even within their organization while making a profit at the same time.
Makes sense to me. Got to get the people, capture them, put them inside your community. and branding. There we go. We solved it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one thing that, CM, you were talking about this earlier, is like there's a lot of other titles out there that they don't have this opportunity to be able to create games. You can't go make your own levels and sponsor them for your organization to players publicly in Call of Duty. If you could do that, that would be fantastic. Sign me up. I'll go start making games on Call of Duty as well. But Fortnite's just ahead of the race right now. Roblox started doing it first, Minecraft as well. Fortnite Creative is much more recent, but I think the application with it and its connection to the popular game that Fortnite is, it's just only going to take off from here.
Yeah, finally some. Now we're talking innovation, Josh. Thanks.
No problem.
I love it. Chris, this is great. I have to. I got to jump.
Yeah, me too, man. No, good to chat. And thanks for CM and Josh for coming up and having a bit of a chat too.
Thank you guys, man. This is fun.
No problem, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Pleasure.
Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Keep me in the loop.
We'll be announcing the next one pretty soon. I got a bit of a backlog of people to get through now because I had a week off. So now I've got more people coming. Thanks everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Same time, same place, next week, 7 days. Catch you later.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.